Hello, my name is Trevor McKeeman. I'm the founder and CEO of Hitchpin. I'd like to welcome you guys to the Alpha Ag Network Summit, February 25th and 26th. I always look at these summits and think, what are the most important reasons to attend and to watch these things? Well, first of all, there's so much happening in agriculture right now. We have changes in technology, we have changes in policy, in trade. All these things are going to be covered in the Alpha Ag Network Summit, including panels with farmers and discussions about weather. From a Hitchpin perspective, we are excited about this, particularly on the front of technology. We think technology is going to change the game as we are able to link farmers as buyers and sellers to be able to hire services and sell things like equipment and cattle and hay. So anyway, join us February 25th and 26th for the Alpha Ag Network Summit. And thank you for joining.
Ag Summit, and we want to thank you all for attending on whatever platform you're streaming this program on. Our panel discussion will start with our interview with Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack. And today it's brought to you by Hitchpin. For more information, go to hitchpin.com, and we thank them for being our presenting sponsor of the Alpha Ag Summit. And we're going to hear from Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, who returns to USDA after serving as Agriculture Secretary during the Obama administration. Secretary Vilsack will give his thoughts on what will be the top priorities of USDA for 2021. As he was confirmed as the 32nd U.S. Secretary of Agriculture just this week on the 23rd by the U.S. Senate. He was nominated by President Biden to return to a role where he served 8 years under President Obama between 2009 and 2017. Prior to returning to USDA, he served as president and CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council from 2017 until February of this year. So before we begin, remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this summit are not those of Alpha Media and do not represent the viewpoints of Alpha Ag Network stations, their farm directors, or management. This broadcast is protected by copyright, and credit should be given whenever sharing or reposting of this video. And let's now go to, and it's an honor to bring back here to the Alpha Ag Summit, and it's a pleasure to say congratulations to the 32nd U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack. Mr. Secretary, we appreciate you joining us today.
Greg, it's great to be with you and to all who are viewing or listening to this Ag Summit. I appreciate the opportunity to have this be one of my first public events as I resume the responsibilities of being Secretary of Agriculture. And obviously, it's a great honor and a great privilege, and frankly, it's historic. No one's ever come back, if you will, to the job, and so I'm looking forward to getting back to work with the hard and working and dedicated folks at USDA. Appreciate the opportunity to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the priorities, as you suggested, for 2021. And then obviously looking forward to the questions that you have. Let me start where I think everyone would start, and that is the issue of COVID. I think it's fair to say that we are very focused in the Biden-Harris administration and in the country on getting on the other side of this virus. We're not going to be able to return to normal. We're not going to be able to return to the economy that we had before until we get on the other side. And so USDA has several roles when it comes to COVID. One of them is to administer the various relief programs that Congress has passed. As you know, over the course of the last year, Congress has appropriated billions of dollars to the Department of Agriculture in the form of COVID relief packages to provide assistance and help. There are actually 3 separate packages. We're in the process of continuing to make payments under the second COVID package. We made payments in December. We're going to continue to make those payments until the resources in that package have been totally used up. Congress provided a third package recently, and we're in the process now of reviewing how best to utilize those remaining resources. I say how best because during the course of my confirmation process, I had a chance to visit with a number of senators and representatives and a number of interest groups representing commodities across the board in agriculture, and received a lot of questions and concerns about the CFAP program and whether or not there were areas of agriculture that were left out in previous packages, or whether there were areas that perhaps didn't receive as much assistance and help as needed. So we're in the process now of reviewing what has been done, who has received the benefits of the previous packages, and what gaps need to be filled with this third package, and whether there are adequate resources to do so, or how those resources need to be added to other resources that the USDA has to provide help and assistance to people that have been struggling. During that period of time, the sign-up period for the third package would have expired, but we felt it was unfair to have that sign-up period expire until people knew what the sort of the rules of the package would be. So we've extended the sign-up period for the third package, and once we've made a decision about how best to allocate those resources among a variety of groups that are requesting help, we'll let folks know what the rules are, and then we'll have an additional 30 days for producers to sign up once they know precisely how the program is going to be conducted. That gives everybody an opportunity to make their applications, to weigh in, and hopefully what we end up with is a package that itself equitably distributes the resources to people who are in need. And over the course of our three packages, that we basically provide a level of help and assistance to folks in a fair and equitable way. So that's one of the responsibilities we have. We obviously have responsibilities to continue to provide nutrition assistance, which enables struggling families to be able to buy a little bit more at the grocery store, which is ultimately helpful to producers. And then as a third area of responsibility in COVID, the Department of Agriculture is actually providing personnel today across the country to provide assistance and help with the vaccination and testing that's required. The reality is we're not going to get on the other side of this, Greg, without enough of us being vaccinated. And that requires people on the ground basically providing those vaccinations. We have roughly 350 people at USDA who have been engaged now in the vaccination effort. We have veterinarians that in 12 states where veterinarians are allowed to administer shots to people. We've got veterinarians working in those states to provide additional help to vaccinate more people. I just spoke yesterday to one of our team in Las Vegas. They're doing about 5,000 to 8,000 shots a day in that city. So that's helpful. And we also have folks from our Forest Service who are working on incident command, basically structuring mass testing and vaccination sites to make sure they're well organized and run in an efficient way. So we are providing help and assistance. We're going to provide facilities for additional testing and storage of vaccination for vaccine. As you know, some of these vaccines require very, very cold refrigeration. We have some of those refrigerators at research facilities across the country, so we're going to make those available as well. The USDA is doing its part to try to get on the other side of COVID. Having said that, I think we're also obviously going to focus on trying to figure out how we would do an even better job of supporting farm families across the board. Now, here's a statistic, Greg, that I think is a troublesome one. ERS put out a study not too long ago that basically took a look at income levels for farm families. And that study showed that 89.6% of American farm families do not make a majority of their living from farming. That means nearly 90% of our farmers do not make their living from farming. They have to have additional income to be able to pay the bills. And I think there's work to be done to make sure that we do a better job of providing assistance and help to farm families so that they can make a living. I can't think of unless you're a YouTube person, I can't think of another occupation where you don't make at least a majority of your living from whatever it is you do day to day. And that's an unfortunate circumstance. So we need to focus on this. Now, how do we focus on it? Well, I think we need deeper markets. I think we need better markets. I think we need more markets. And let me talk about all three of those. When I say deeper markets, I think I've learned over the last 4 years working for the dairy industry and exports, the importance of having presence in these export markets. The deeper our presence is, the more people we have on the ground, the more promotions we conduct, the more partnerships we have with people in key markets, the greater the chances are that we'll enhance export opportunities. And many of the commodities have already done this, but we need to continue to deepen the presence, and USDA needs to provide the resources to assist in deepening the presence on the export market so that we can export more. And secondly, we need new markets. And when I say new markets, it's not just expanding beyond existing export markets that we have with potentially new free trade agreements or agreements that are implemented in the way they're intended, like the USMCA. It's also about creating new ways for farmers to benefit economically. And one way to do that is by looking at ways in which we can not only address some of the challenges we have with climate, but also create new revenue streams for farmers. Can we create mechanisms and systems where farmers will be paid to sequester carbon? Can we encourage more capture and reuse of methane? Can we convert agricultural waste into a variety of different ingredients and products, creating new market opportunities for farmers that creates a multitude of revenue sources? So if we have a disruption in one area of the farm economy, there are still other opportunities within that farm to essentially profit. So we're going to be focusing on trying to create, trying to support, trying to strengthen the opportunities for these new markets to take hold, to create new revenue streams for farmers. And then the third area is better markets. And when I say better markets, I think it means markets that are more open, more transparent, more competitive. I think we found during the course of the pandemic that our food system was not as resilient as it needs to be, especially on the processing side. Are there ways in which USDA can provide the ability to amplify, to expand, to increase the processing capacities within the United States, creating competition for products, but also creating great resiliency in the system? So that's going to be an area that we're going to be focusing on with a key emphasis there on markets. And then the last thing I would say is that we have a tremendous workforce at USDA, and we want to make sure that we are focusing on strengthening that workforce. There have been a number of vacancies that haven't been filled in key areas. I've heard a lot of concerns about farm service agency offices that need to be staffed, that are working incredibly hard. Obviously, this is a difficult time with COVID, people working from home, the stress that's associated. So we need to take a look at our workforce, and we need to make sure we do take steps to strengthen the workforce. And as we do that, we also need to make sure that we continue to address the issues of equity and fairness within USDA. I think, obviously, as we all know, there's been a history USDA has had where folks were discriminated against, and we want to make sure that we do right and make sure that the department is treating everybody fairly and equitably over the course of the next 4 years and beyond. So a lot of work to do at USDA, a lot of regular work, obviously, that needs to be done as well. But I thought I'd touch on a couple of those areas just to get us started, and I look forward to questions that you and the viewers may have.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack is joining us on the Alpha Ag Summit. This portion of the program brought to you by Hitchpin. You can go to hitchpin.com to get more information, and go to alphaagsummit.com to get more information as well. Mr. Secretary, you talked about presence in export markets. What role do you see USDA? You mentioned some of the ways in opening markets for producers. I give an example. The Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Affairs is a new position that didn't exist in your time as the first time as Agriculture Secretary. So has that position been successful in raising the level of emphasis on ag and negotiations and work with international organizations like the WTO?
Well, I think Undersecretary McKinney, who served in the previous administration, did a good job of raising awareness. I think he was very aggressive. He worked incredibly hard. He traveled all over the world prior to COVID, espousing and supporting U.S. agriculture. I think that's part of the job. I think also part of the job is figuring out creative ways that the resources that USDA provides through market promotion programs, through foreign market assistance programs, how can we use those resources in the most effective way to deepen our presence in those export markets? Again, I learned from my experience in the dairy industry the importance of partnerships and relationships, Greg. We may think that we know what people want from our products, but the reality is that our taste, the way in which we consume food, what we like and what we dislike, may be different than it is in other countries. And so it's really important to understand and appreciate what the consumers in these markets want, and then be able to satisfy their needs. It's also important for us to continue to look for ways in which we can innovate in the food space. There are universities throughout the various export markets that we deal with that are looking at food and looking at food innovation and looking at new ways to utilize ingredients in the development of food. We need to be aware of what is going on in that innovation space. What we're finding is that as countries create more middle class consumers, as they become more urbanized in their population, it's on the go. It's can I consume it quickly? Can I consume it while I'm riding to work? And that changes the way in which food needs to be processed, changes the way in which ingredients can be used, changes the eating patterns, if you will, of folks. And can we, as a exporter, be able to adjust to those changes so that we're continually looking at opportunity? I would say also that we obviously keep an eye on the need for us to diversify and have multiple markets where we are doing business. It's not enough to rely on one market. Obviously, China is a big market, but we understand and appreciate the sort of the uncertainty, the unsettledness of that market. And any given day, the Phase 1 trade agreement can be turned upside down for reasons not related to trade. So, I want to make sure that we're not just putting all of our eggs in a single basket.
Before I get to China, then I'll ask this, and understanding that you are just literally back into the job as Agriculture Secretary, but is it the feeling of the president or the administration to continue working on the bilateral trade deals, or in this case, maybe pursue more towards the multilateral trade deals?
Well, I think there are options for both. And I would say there's probably three aspects of this. One is making sure that the trade agreements we have are enforced and implemented the way in which they were intended. I make a specific reference to the USMCA agreement with Mexico and Canada. There are issues that have cropped up relative to implementation that I think are important to U.S. agriculture, and we need to be vigilant in that space. Secondly, there are opportunities with individual countries. I think of the United Kingdom, for example, where there may be an opportunity at some point in time for negotiations to continue for a trade agreement that results in a bilateral arrangement. And then to your point about multilateral trade agreements, I think there is a desire and should be a desire and a hope to re-engage with the countries that ultimately entered into the Comprehensive Trans-Pacific Partnership Arrangement, which we formerly knew as TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, to be able to re-engage with those countries to see whether or not the United States can get back into that trade arrangement. I think there are two reasons to do it. One, it obviously opens up new market opportunities and levels the playing field for us in some key Asian markets. But two, it also provides a balance to Chinese influence in Asia, which I think from a national security perspective and from an economic security perspective is important.
You mentioned keeping countries and making sure they come through with their agreements that they have. We look at China, and everyone in agriculture, of course, looking at the numbers of what China had has promised that they would do during the Phase 1 trade deal, and they have been coming up short as far as the numbers are concerned. So how does USDA approach this in regards to making sure China reaches that Phase 1 target and ensure continued exports?
Well, it's complicated because China in that Phase 1 agreement preserved the right to make adjustments based on market conditions. And I suppose that they could say, by virtue of the virus and by virtue of the global impact that that's had on the economy, that has altered their capacity to meet the Phase 1 levels. I will say they've got a few more days of purchasing to decide whether or not they've met the levels. Clearly, they've purchased a lot recently. In some of the commodities, we're at record levels, and we're seeing as a result of that, and maybe the weather conditions in South America, some of the markets are bolstered and better than they have been for some time, which is obviously good news. I think the key with China is to make sure that there's an understanding and recognition of the importance of maintaining that trade relationship, notwithstanding some of the other areas where there may be serious disagreements. And I alluded to this earlier. You could have an incident in the South China Sea. You could have a situation involving Taiwan or Hong Kong or minority status in China that could disrupt this relationship. So obviously the folks on the diplomatic side of the U.S. government are aware of the need of the delicate balance of this relationship. In some places we compete, in some places we conflict, and in some places we cooperate. And I hope in the trade area there is a level of cooperation, at least as it relates to the ag portion of it. There are obviously some continued situations involving trade that need to be rectified and need to be adjusted. And I'm sure that those negotiations will take place. We obviously need a U.S. trade representative confirmed, and I'm hopeful that she will be confirmed in the very near future. I'm confident that she will work hard and that she understands and appreciates the important role of agriculture in trade discussions and negotiations.
We are pleased to be joined by Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack during our Alpha Ag Summit. Once again, it is presented by Hitchpin and is also sponsored this segment by Hitchpin as well. You had mentioned earlier, Mr. Secretary, and have made comments throughout the time period here as you've gone through the nomination process about looking at ways, or are there ways to pay farmers to sequester carbon. One of the areas that looks at is the Commodity Credit Corporation. Everyone knows that as CCC. Do you believe that USDA has the legal authority to use the funds in CCC to pay farmers to sequester carbon?
Yeah, I've not had a chance to specifically talk to the lawyers at USDA precisely about that question, but here's what I do know. First and foremost, the important role of CCC is to make sure that farm bill programs are paid for and covered. So anything that's been done or should be done or will be done with reference to the Commodity Credit Corporation should not compromise or jeopardize the ability of that source of resource to be able to make good on whatever the responsibilities are under the Farm Bill program. So I think the previous administration walked right up to the line and put Congress in a particularly difficult situation by using CCC resources for trade facilitation payments to the point where there wasn't enough money absent congressional action to take care of the Farm Bill payments. I don't think we're going to do that. We're going to try to avoid that type of situation. Having said that, the purpose of CCC in part is to help support and create markets. And so to the extent that that authority would allow the development of ways in which we can provide assistance and help, I think it behooves us
Having said that, there is
to try to determine whether.
Having said that, there is also a push by some ag organizations that they're going to look at increasing the amount of funding within CCC as well. Is that something that needs to be taken a look at too?
Well, here's the challenge with that, Greg, that when you basically increase the capacity of CCC, the way the Congressional Budget Office scores this is not as if it's a 1-year allocation or appropriation. They score it as a 10-year allocation appropriation. So, for example, some have suggested going from $30 billion to $50 billion. Well, normally you would say, well, that's a $20 billion increase, and maybe in a multi-trillion-dollar budget, that's not that big a deal. The problem is that's not how it's scored. It would be scored as a $200 billion a score. That does get people's attention. So, to me, the key here is either utilizing resources wisely, but also taking a look at ways in which on a year-to-year basis, Congress might be willing, as they did in COVID, might be willing to bump up, if you will, the authority under CCC for 1 year. If they do it for a year as opposed to a permanent increase, then it's only scored for that single year. So I think there are options there. But at the end of the day, I think we take a look at what the program is, take a look at what the responsibilities are under the Farm Bill programs. And if there's excess, if there is some flexibility, then I think it behooves us to ask the question, are there ways in which we can use that resource to put more money in the pockets of farmers? If there are, then we should certainly think about it. But I said it before, we do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the capacity to do what the CCC was designed to do, which is to take care of the Farm Bill programs.
How do you look at a program that would look to sequester carbon? How would it take shape and it addresses the dramatic growing conditions in crops across the U.S.? I'm based here in Topeka, Kansas, and I'll just use an example of carbon capture and soil health practices in the southwest part of Kansas, which annually receive about 15 inches of rain. Well, obviously, they're a little different than areas that go 40 plus inches of rain or, say, farming practices that occur in the heart of the Corn Belt.
Well, I think the first thing you do is you reach out to the people who know best, that is the farmers, and get input from farmers, get input from the experts in terms of how you would potentially design, or in the alternative, how you would support a privately structured market. We have a number of ecosystem markets already out there today that are operating. What can we learn from those experiences that would allow us to do a better job? I think it's also about making sure that we create a structure that is trusted, right? A structure that is authentic, if you will, or a system that basically provides results that can be verified and measured appropriately. So there's work to be done on that space, which I think USDA can be involved in. And I think it's also a matter of how do we use the existing resources under our conservation programs? Are there ways in which we can enhance regenerative practices, soil health practices? I mean, Greg, here's another statistic from a 2016 study that was done by the Office of Science and Technology at the White House. That study suggested we're losing about 4.5 tons of topsoil per acre per year in this country. We're only basically replacing that with about a half a ton that's naturally produced of topsoil. So we don't necessarily want to spend down the bank here in terms of our precious resource. So I think we have to look for ways in which we can provide assistance and help to farmers that we know will essentially improve soil health. How do we use existing programs to make sure that farmers are able to do that without suffering financially?
In the time we have remaining, I want to ask you a couple other things. The issue of small refinery exemptions for those small oil refineries, it's been a thorn in the side of the renewable fuels industry for the past few years. So how important is it for you to find a solution to this issue? And can you also talk about the importance of ethanol to corn growers across the country?
Well, when you talk about ethanol, you're essentially talking about roughly a third of the corn crop essentially going into ethanol production, and doing it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the capacity for meeting the food needs of the country and of the world. That's the amazing story of corn production. That's the amazing story of utilizing DDGs and so forth from the production of ethanol. So it's about jobs. It's about stability in the corn market. It's about a better environment. Clearly, ethanol has a better footprint, if you will, than regular gas. It's about consumer choice. So and consumer basically benefits because it's lower cost gas. So there are multiple reasons for this industry to be supported. I'm pleased with the recent announcement from the EPA that essentially we're going to go back to the way the law was written as it relates to waivers. The law suggested that there needed to be a safety valve for very small refineries that from time to time are faced with difficulty in meeting the renewable fuel standard. That's fair. That recognizes that there may be a circumstance from time to time. But what we saw before was a circumstance where large scale refineries were receiving these waivers fairly easily and fairly routinely. I think that practice is going to stop based on the recent announcements from EPA. So that's good news for the refineries. It's good for the biofuel industry. It's good news for consumers.
As your time is limited, we'll get one more question in here. You mentioned EPA. Can you explain on how you are going to be working with the EPA, and if he is confirmed, it would be the new administrator, Michael Regan, to ensure that farmer interests are considered when EPA acts on whatever they need to act on and other concerns? Because as you know, within agriculture, they keep a close eye on some of the decisions coming out of the EPA.
Well, I was nominated before Michael was nominated, so I had the opportunity when he was nominated to reach out to him and to begin the conversation even before either one of us was confirmed. And I think we both agreed about the important relationship between USDA and the EPA, the important roles that we each play, the constituencies that we represent, and the need for constant communication. And so I have a commitment from him, and he has a commitment, obviously, from me, for us to maintain constant communication. Neither one of us can be surprised by what our agencies or departments are going to do. Secondly, there needs to be consistency. I think it's important for us to make sure that there aren't rapid changes, if you will, in policy without some opportunity for us to have a conversation. And then finally, if there is going to be something that impacts and affects agriculture, are there ways in which the Department of Agriculture or the EPA can provide assistance during a transition? So I think there's going to be a good relationship between the two of us and between our two departments. I don't think there'll be surprises. I think there'll be consistent decision making. There'll be transparency, and I think there'll be ways in which we'll be able to provide help and assistance in the event EPA has to do something because of a court decision or direction from Congress.
Well, Mr. Secretary, we very much appreciate you joining us today, taking the time out to join us on literally day 2 of your job. And I appreciate you taking the time out to join us here during the Alpha Ag Summit.
Well, Greg, it's good to be back with you, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to work with you today, and look forward to future opportunities to be interviewed.
The Alpha Ag Network, along with our sponsors, are proud to bring you the Ag Summit, and a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Hitchpin. The views and opinions expressed on today's panel are not those of Alpha Media and do not represent the viewpoints of Alpha Ag Network stations, their farm directors, or management. This broadcast is protected by copyright law, and credit should be given whenever sharing or reposting of this video. Alpha Ag Network, local farm programming, promoting, also respecting and celebrating the industry that drives our communities, agriculture. Coming up next, we are going to look at the congressional panels representing the House and Senate Ag Committee. Our producer has been Shayla Reilinger, along with our Alpha Ag Network colleagues. Thank you for joining us for watching this portion of the Alpha Ag Summit.